What's going on, guys? Hey, we're back with a brand new Cappy Army video, and by brand new I mean 1 day older. When was it? 1 day old. But we usually jump on this stuff right away. But there's a there's so much content to react to, as well as making my own content, as well as making updates in Ukraine videos, as well as making kind of news report style videos about what's happening globally. So there's just a lot going on, man. And I'm not complaining. I am grateful for to be in the position that I am to be able to talk with you guys and share my opinion and perspective on a lot of this stuff. So that said, we're gonna watch this. This says you won't believe what the CIA did in Cuba. So I don't know if that means recent or in the past, but I know Cuba's been barking up the wrong tree with the United States lately. And I also heard that there are a bunch of Iranian shaheeds in Cuba, which, if you guys, you probably know, the U.S. is very much in range of Cuba, specifically like the southeastern states like Florida, Georgia, Bama, that stuff. So this is going to be sick. Please like, share, subscribe, you guys. We're on the road to 50,000 subs. I know this is a small channel, but I do believe we're doing somewhat of a service here and bringing value to people. We have a ton of resources in our Discord if you want to join it. We keep our uncensored footage there for our members too. But we have recruitment resources, news resources, air alert updates here for regions here in Ukraine if you just like to stay updated and see what we what the Ukrainians put up with day in and day out with all these alerts. Speaking of which, another massive strike in Kyiv last night killed 20 people, including a bunch of women and children. It's awful, dude. It is it sucks. It sucks. There's words can't really do anything. I mean, this has been going on for so long. It's awful. All right, let's jump into it, man. If you want a t-shirt, did I already say that? Grab one. It's we've got our anti-Putin social club tees in the description.
Campaign against the communist. The CIA is now conducting a covert action campaign against the communist Cuban government. They just created a...
Dude, let me just say, off jump before we even get into it. It is going down in the world right now, dude. Between what's happening in the Middle East and all the different nations getting involved, and what's happening here in Russia, between Ukraine and Russia, what's happening here in Ukraine, what's happening also in Russia because of all the long-range drone strikes Ukraine's successfully committing into Russia. It's crazy, dude. Now we got Cuba. We still have Venezuela doing stuff. We had troops in Ecuador a couple months ago.
Brand new dedicated task force designed to target Cuba. And we'll see how they're now deploying spies, analysts, and covert paramilitary officers on the island. This information is according to a new report released by the New York Times, who interviewed multiple sources familiar with this escalating mission.
Cuba's foreign minister says his country is under direct threat of military aggression by the U.S.
And so today, I want to go beyond the headline and look at 3 questions. What is the CIA actually trying to do in Cuba? Why does Washington suddenly think that the regime is vulnerable now? And if Cuba's leaders refuse to change, just how far is America prepared to go? I'm Chris Cappy, former infantryman and war correspondent. Fire around at the subscribe button and let's find out. In May, the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, flew to Cuba and personally delivered a message to the sitting communist government. In a not-so-subtle gesture, he brought alongside him one of the actual paramilitary officers who fought in the Venezuela raid, who killed the Cuban intelligence officers who were guarding Maduro himself. During the meeting, Director Ratcliffe told the Cuban government to make fundamental changes, to stop helping America's adversaries, and to do it soon. But so far, Cuba has interpreted the warning as more of a strongly worded suggestion. Despite the ongoing crippling American oil embargo against Cuba that has caused rolling blackouts and prevented almost any fuel from reaching them, Cuba's government has not backed down. Now, just months later, we know what was sitting behind Ratcliffe's threat: the creation of this new CIA task force. It sounds vague, but what it actually means is instead of Cuba being one desk at the CIA that's competing for multiple different resources, by creating this dedicated task force, it allows the agency to quickly concentrate funding and their most experienced officers on this one objective. The agency is flooding in a coordinated network of spies and surveillance systems onto the island. They face severe consequences
Straight to jail.
if they're
You overcook the fish, straight to jail. You undercook the fish, straight to jail.
caught there.
Where my Parks and Rec fans at, man?
New York Times and Politico spoke to 2 U.S. intelligence sources that said the Trump administration is preparing a bigger campaign to cause regime change in the Cuban Communist government. Mark Polymeropoulos, a former CIA deputy chief for operations in Europe, told the Miami Herald that the task force is likely preparing the environment to do either military action or covert action, and covert action doesn't mean a coup, it can mean influence operations. The new CIA task force has started by digging into the financial networks and foreign business dealings of senior Cuban officials. What they're most focused on is the money moving outside Cuba. Apparently, socialism gets a little more flexible once the money reaches an offshore account. And so the logic here is if Washington, D.C. can prove that the senior members of the Cuban government have accumulated mass amounts of wealth abroad, while their ordinary citizens deal with electrical blackouts and shortages of supplies, that information can become a political weapon for the CIA. Because the CIA has used versions of this strategy elsewhere against Russia. What they do is they collect intelligence about Russian corruption, how some businessmen have hidden assets or questionable business relationships, and then they selectively expose that information publicly. So when you see on the news or the TMZ where they expose someone, there's a good chance that that's the CIA. That embarrasses the officials of foreign governments and it damages their legitimacy. And in turn, rival factions in Cuba can move against each other. This makes it easier to get individuals to cooperate with America for millions of dollars in bribes. From the informant's perspective, it can be a better retirement plan than remaining loyal to a sinking government. And the place that the agency is focused on is the military-controlled conglomerate called Gaeza in Cuba, which plays a huge role in the country's tourism, finances, and other major industries. And that's really downplaying it because Gaeza controls an estimated 40 to 70% of the entire Cuban economy.
Gaeza is a business conglomerate
40%.
operated by the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, and it's even more powerful than the island's Communist Party.
It'd be like if Amazon or Google here in America controlled that much of the American economy. Wait a second, does it? The CIA has signaled out that Gaeza network as one of the economic pillars still keeping the Cuban government alive. And so the new team could pave the way for military action like they did in Venezuela, or influence operations that seek regime change on the island that's located just 90 miles from America. America is giving Cuba options, just some of the options arrive by attack helicopter. The new team includes case officers whose job it is to find and recruit people inside Cuba. Then they manage those human sources as their handler. There are cyber
Dude, that would be such a fun job. Oh my gosh. Am I too big up here? I feel like I'm abnormally large today.
operators and officers specializing in covert influence operations designed to get Cuba's own politicians to cooperate. According to people briefed on the operation, the primary target isn't what you would think it would be. They're not focused on sabotaging the Cuban conventional military. They're focused on the Cuban political elite. The new CIA task force emerges at the same time as there's now increasing mounting US pressure on Cuba. And to that end, the Justice Department in America unsealed charges recently against Fidel Castro's brother, Raul Castro, and other Cuban officials over the 1996 shootdown of a US civilian aircraft. So they're going after the former president of Cuba. And this gives America a legal argument for framing Castro's capture as a law enforcement operation instead of a conventional military intervention, similar to the justification used for the raid that captured Maduro. Regime change sounds a lot less dramatic and a big deal when you call it serving a warrant. In 2026, the economic pressure escalated dramatically on Cuba. The United States cut off oil supplies to the country by preventing them from receiving oil from Venezuela or Mexico. Cuba's own energy minister announced that the country had completely run out of diesel and fuel oil reserves. In parts of Havana, electricity has gone off for 20 hours a day, triggering protests in the streets. So when the CIA talks about finding cracks inside the Cuban elite, this is the environment that they're looking for. Economic collapse doesn't automatically produce regime change, but it does make loyalty more expensive and dissent a lot easier to recruit for the CIA. Public transportation has been crippled by fuel shortages, and Reuters reported that some government pensions have fallen to the equivalent of just $7 a month on the black market exchange rate. Because all of these actions, the oil embargo.
Okay, I thought he was going to end that sentence with $7 a day. Yeah, I'm way too big up here, I think. Sorry. I thought he was going to say 7 a day, dude. $7 a month? What?
The charges against their former president, the sanctions on their economy, sending these covert operatives, it's all the CIA trying to create divisions inside the Cuban government and then exploiting those divisions. The new task force is reaching out to encourage the more pragmatic Cuban officials to distance themselves from the hardliners who are unwilling to compromise with the United States government. The country's current president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, is seen as one of those hardliners, and that is a very different operation from the CIA's original Cuba task force that was created in the 1960s. That organization eventually helped train and equip Cuban exiles for the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, so this time they appear to be trying something with fewer beaches. Unlike then, the new task force has no organized Cuban proxy army, and there's currently no authorization to conduct lethal operations. This is why covert action is called the third option of statecraft. It sits between diplomacy and fighting an overt military war. This is an important distinction, though. We're not looking at a Bay of Pigs sequel. The new operation is said to be an intelligence-driven campaign designed to make the Cuban government start fighting from within. But how are they seeking to do that? What these American spies are up against is the Cuban primary foreign intelligence agency called the Intelligence Directorate, or DI, often referred to as G2. Cuban intelligence has a reputation for being unusually good at running double agents against the US. In 1987, a Cuban intelligence defector revealed that dozens of supposed CIA assets working inside Cuba were actually double agents working for Havana and feeding Washington, D.C. controlled or disinformation. In order to exploit these growing cracks in Cuba's economy, though, we can see how the US is trying to increase pressure by moving toward military strikes. And how are they doing this? Every presidential administration creates what's called the Intelligence Collection Priorities, which is in a document called the National Intelligence Priorities Framework, or the NIPF. And according to New York Times, the Trump administration recently revised its version of the document to designate Cuba as an NIPF Priority 1. They've been graduated to the big leagues because they now are in the same category as China, Iran, and Russia. And what this authorizes now is that the US intelligence agencies have been given the go-ahead to start turning their most expensive assets toward Cuba. Increased satellite tracking now gives the US military updated options for strikes against Cuba. It gives them a better look at Cuba's military capabilities and defenses. But what are those millions of dollars worth of satellites and assets actually seeing there? The capability that the Trump administration has pointed to as most concerning is Cuba's attack drone program. Classified US intelligence was recently revealed and shown to Axios that reveals Cuba has acquired over 300 attack drones. Since 2023, the Cuban government has acquired these weapons in their arsenal from Russia and Iran. Cuba may be short on fuel, but apparently not on things designed to explode. And the Cuban operatives have gained experience from modern combat in one of the...
Man, I hope and pray the United States has taken some notes. The Department of War, or even Homeland Security, has taken notes from what's happening in Ukraine, and Russia had built up a ton of air defense on the coastline, specifically near Cuba. Because if they've been sleeping on this, thinking, yeah, the war will never touch us, and they start launching drones, dude. Cuba starts launching drones. It's so close, man. People damn near can swim from Cuba to Florida, let alone these drones that can fly hundreds, in some cases thousands of kilometers. They could potentially reach DC. Probably not. It's probably too far, but you get my point.
The most dangerous wars in the world. Putin has been paying Cuba's government $25,000 for each soldier that they send over to help in his war against Ukraine. A senior American officer said that they send over paying Cuba's government $25,000. One of the most dangerous wars in the world. Putin has been paying Cuba's government $25,000 for each soldier that they send over to help in his war against Ukraine. A senior American officer said, quote, "They're part of Putin's meat grinder. They're learning about Iranian tactics. It's something we have to plan for." And Russia's foreign aid program now includes complimentary battlefield experience. What they're using in Cuba is the Shahed 136 model, likely, which was imported to them, and it can blow up a small house. Cuban officials have created contingency plans, according to Axios, to use the attack drones to strike Florida, apparently unaware of the retaliation that would bring from Florida Man. But their main target would be much closer. It'd be the 6,000 American personnel already stationed on the island at the American-controlled base at Guantanamo Bay. During the Cold War, Cuban forces built extensive defensive positions overlooking the base, and they routinely rehearsed military operations to capture it or to try to infiltrate it stealthily, like Metal Gear Solid. Cuban forces' objective...
I hope so, because Russia built up a lot of air defense during the Cold War as well. What happened to all that? Obviously it wasn't maintained. Obviously it wasn't continuously trained on. Hopefully that's not the case for the U.S.
would be to create a dramatic image of attacks on U.S. military installations, because they would be unlikely to be able to actually overwhelm the base. The U.S. has deployed an aircraft carrier and a Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Caribbean, consisting of thousands of troops right near Cuba. Cuban Deputy Foreign Minister Carlos Fernandez accused the U.S. government of waging a quote-unquote coldly calculated strategy against the island nation. He said if the campaign progressed to military action, it would, quote, "those participating in it would be complicit in an eventual bloodbath." And who would be in that bloodbath? The CIA has learned that the Cuban government hosts Iranian military advisors from the Quds Force who assist with their attack drones. Cuba is very unlikely to use their attack drones against commercial ships, like how Iran has, because the island nation depends so heavily on imports. Like Iran's, Cuba's defensive strategy is also asymmetric, but in a different way, as we'll see. The American intelligence satellites have discovered that Cuban operatives have coastal missiles that have a range of between 50 to 90 miles, which is why U.S. drone and thermal surveillance has recently been kicked into overdrive. A U.S. Navy Triton high-altitude surveillance drone flew near Havana. Then things escalated from there. Very recently, an American RC-135 rivet joint signals intelligence aircraft swept over Cuba. These are the kind of assets that are used to map out targets for airstrikes. The CIA is looking into Cuba's air defense. They field one of the largest ground-based air defense systems in all of Latin America because they inherited hundreds of old Soviet surface-to-air missile systems like their SA-3 and the 9K-35 Strela, which they operate over 200 of those vehicles. And to try to stop an American helicopter air assault like the one conducted against Venezuela, they have hundreds of anti-aircraft cannons. These systems are placed around the capital of Havana, the center of their political power, their military facilities, their ports, and any possible invasion beaches. However, many of these systems have fallen into total disrepair recently and no longer work. Whether these air defense systems would even be manned or not in the face of overwhelming firepower is uncertain. All of these military missions fall under the United States Operation Southern Spear, which costs roughly $800 million so far, under Southcom's authority. But the interesting thing to note here, I think, is that very recently in August, it was renamed to Western Hemisphere Task Force, and the renaming and reorganizing is a clear sign of operations to come. It's stated that its goal is to be against criminal organizations and drug trafficking, but in practice, it also provides the operational support for sustained missions against Cuba, for military pressure and keeping the embargo against Cuba. It gives the U.S. legal and institutional cover to pressure Cuba as they continue to destroy alleged narco-trafficking boats. The other information that the CIA collects is on Cuba's defensive positions. The Cuban government still has huge tunnel system that goes underground, along with hardened bunker networks that they have that go 21 miles or 33 kilometers, and they're known as the popular tunnels in Cuba. They go beneath the capital. It was intended primarily as a bomb shelter during the Cold War. The Cuban government claims that it goes to a depth of over 100 meters, and it contains rocket launchers, vehicles, and ammunition storage, they say. It's modeled after the idea of protecting against American bunker buster bombs. And according to an old American Defense Intelligence Agency report that I dug up, all essential Cuban command, control, and communication sites are in hardened bunkers, and that many of the sites are in greater than 20 meters below the surface, making some too deep to attack with conventional munitions, says the United States intelligence agencies. And they've been monitoring these bunker developments for decades. When Cuba was at its peak strength, they had over 200,000 troops that were divided between 3 regional armies with 3 armored divisions and 15 infantry divisions. But today, it's shrunk to 50,000 active duty troops and about 40,000 reservists, although their strategy would not be to fight conventionally. So the American Intelligence Agency closely monitors what's left of these armed forces. And Cuba used to have thousands of armored personnel carriers, tanks, and artillery systems put together, and the Cuban Air Force had hundreds of attack aircraft. But today, the issue is serviceability. Many estimates suggest that only a small fraction of that force is operational today, about 10%, because fuel shortages have grounded most of the fleet, and having fighter jets on paper and actually having fighter jets that do damage are 2 very different things. Today, the Cuban military is now a shadow of its former self, and budgetary allocations fell drastically as the Cuban economy underwent a period of extreme hardship in the post-Soviet 1990s when they stopped having that support. So the collection of this intelligence by the CIA is a strong sign that the agency is preparing for something big in the Caribbean. And the most likely scenario from here is that we'll either see an economic collapse in Cuba that leads to a revolt, or the leadership will be decapitated in a military strike like what happened in Venezuela, or a limited air campaign against the Cuban government, or they just continue to refuse to cooperate and they continue to be defiant, or a full-blown invasion happens. The question is whether Cuba's leaders make the changes themselves, or if the CIA is preparing to find somebody who will do it for them. If you found this video interesting, check out this one about how the US strategy is to build pipelines to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran's newest proxy standing in the way. I'm your average infantryman.
Guys, please check out Cappy's channel. He does some of the best work on YouTube when it comes to this kind of content, man. I don't know how he does it. He must have a team of people who are just scouring AI, using AI to find the latest and newest information that's put out through Axios and different news outlets and stuff, because he is always so thorough. But this is crazy, dude. I genuinely, I want to know what you guys think in the comments below. I don't see the US taking any military actions against Cuba while threats are so high in the Middle East. And after, guys, be nice to each other, please. And after this new intelligence was brought up that Putin could be planning an attack on a NATO country, some kind of an incursion. I don't think the US would want to split their resources that much. And, you know, there's already theories and rumors. Hey, guys, even though there's nothing on paper about it, there's theories and rumors that the US is low on specific types of pretty much just smart bombs, certain munitions. That's hard for me to believe, but one reason I could believe it potentially is because of the use of AI now in specifically these ballistic campaigns, these missile bombing campaigns that the US is running in Iran. AI could be just expending way more munitions than the US had planned for. So that potentially that could be a thing. That would, because in my mind I'm like, there's no way these generals and heads of the military would ever let the US even get to close to halfway capacity of any of these munitions. There's no way. But because the use of military AI is so new, and we've seen the stats on how many missiles have been launched. It's insane. X amount a day, X amount a week. It's like, it blew me away when we saw those numbers, but maybe they weren't expecting that. That would be a pretty serious oversight by the military to let the AI program just burn through all their munition. But I don't know. I don't see the US taking military action necessarily. I do like I am happy they've got a carrier strike group in down by Florida, and it sounds like they've maintained some of those Cold War era air defense systems. But how many warships are in the Strait of Hormuz right now, or outside of Iran, and they are still struggling to hit all the drones that Iran shoots off. It's hard, man, and I don't think anybody realizes until they're in the position where they're defending. Ask Russia, where they're defending against these waves and waves and waves of drones, how difficult it is to actually systematically and effectively eliminate all of them, or even the majority percentage. So anyways, let me know what you think. Super cool video. Love Cappy, man. Please like, share, subscribe, grab a t-shirt if you want one, jump in the Discord, and my socials are linked below too. I love you guys. Peace.